Hello, I'm Marja from Misfit Sewing Society. Today I'm making a bunny using Sew for Home's free bunny pattern. I'm using this thrifted stained shawl as my fabric, and because it's so stretchy, I need to stabilize it with a fusible interfacing before cutting it out. This is a fusible interfacing. It is a stretch interfacing. It's just what I happen to have, and it stabilizes it while keeping a little bit of the stretch. So I'm just ironing this onto the back of the sweater, and then I'm going to cut out my pieces. So I have 2 pattern pieces pinned onto my main fabric. Got it double, right sides together, so I'm going to get 2 mirror images when I cut out that, and then 2 of these ones as well. I'm going to use a rotary cutter for most of it, but then I'll go in with the on the corners and cut with scissors. Because I won't be able to get precise corners, inside corners with the rotary cutter. I'm doing this so that I can take this whole chunk away from the fabric. It'll be easier for me to cut it out and get those precise corners. It's easier to cut towards the inside corner, and you get a neater little piece if you cut towards the corner each time. And for these notches, you're just going to cut right here. But don't remove the pattern yet from don't unpin it. Because we're going to use that point, those stitch marks. We're going to be doing a dart right there. Once your fabric pieces are all cut out, make sure that you get a cat to sit on them for at least 5 minutes. Hi, sweetie. That's Spooky. Spook, you're doing a very important job for me. So we have 2 fronts, 2 backs, 2 feet from the accent, and 4 ears. So you want to have 2 from your main and 2 from the accent. Step 1, create the ears. Okay, so we have 2 ears from the main fabric and 2 from the accent, and we're going to put those right sides together, so you'll make sure that they're lining up so that the right shapes are together. And you can see I cut the accent piece a little bit narrower than the main one, and the reason why I did that was so that the inner ear is going to be just a little bit tucked inside the outside of the ear. And so when I'm sewing it, I'm going to pull the fabrics together so they line up. As I get around the tip, I'll pull the other edge over to line up again, and I'll just do that all the way down to the end. Before we turn the ears right side out, I'm going to trim the seam allowance down a little bit. Now that the ear is finished, we're going to fold it. And you can look on your pattern and find the line where it's supposed to fold right there. So it's not right in the middle, it's right where the point is at the bottom. Or you can put the ear on it and you can find that line and go like this. That. And then you can pin it. And you can just leave it pinned like this and use it like that. Or you can sew across here just to hold it together for you for a little, just to make it a little easier when you're putting it into the bunny. I stitched across just to hold them, to make it a little easier when I'm putting them on the bunny. Okay, it is time to create the bunny body. So we're going to take the front. You'll have two pieces. You'll have your piece for the front, and make sure that your two pieces are mirror images so that when you have them out, they're opposite to each other. So I want to keep them with the pattern piece for now because we're going to add some marks. First thing we're going to mark is at the head, right here where it says front part 1. There's the eye. This is where the ears are going to go. And to mark those, we're going to do a tiny little snip into the fabric, just in the seam allowance, on there, towards that dot in there. And check. See, that way we're going to be able to see where to put the ear. Now the last thing we do before we take the pattern off is right down here, this, where you see this dart, you want to make sure that you cut the fabric in like that. So you should be able to see just a little slit in the fabric like that. But we also need to mark that point. That's the stitch line. And the best thing to do is if you can find a pin that doesn't have a head, we're going to grab that one and put it through right at the tip. And I'm going to pull the paper pattern right off. Now I have that pin marking my spot. It's hard to see. Now I'll take the pattern off. I also want it marked on the other side. Now I know where the tip of the dart is. While we're here, might as well do the same thing on the back pieces. So the back looks like this. So we're going to look for the dart, cut that little V shape, and put your pin right there at the tip. So you have your dart tip marked, but we also need to mark the stitching line here. Now in the pattern, you can see the stitching line and it turns a corner, but really it should extend all the way down to here. So you can either mark it by cutting a little snip, just like this, just a little guy. And the other one will be lined up. You can see it's lined up with there. It will just come to here. And then I'm also going to use my marker just to mark it so it's more obvious. Okay, so we're ready to do the darts. So we're going to take away the pattern piece, and I'm going to take away one of the back pieces. I'm going to start with the back. So I'm going to fold it over like this so that the little spot where we snip to mark the stitching line, that's right there. I'm matching those up. And then the point, I can see the point of the dart right up there, that purple dot. So that's going to be right there on the fold. So if you have clips, this is a good idea. Use clips. I'm trying to pin it, clip it so that it's not in the way of my stitching. I'm going to go like that. Okay, so our stitching line will be from this point right here to this little clip. So most of the time when I sew a dart, I prefer to end my seam at the tip. So I'm going to flip it over and do it from this side. And backstitch at the tip of the dart. So I'm matching the two little legs of the dart, those two little snips at the bottom. And when you pin, you can pin them, but just pin just to the side of the snip. And then you want to have the edge of the fold of the dart right where your dot is at the top. And you can use clips or pins. I like to sew from the biggest part of the seam and finish at the point of the dart. Okay, so now we have the front darts to do. Right there, I have the dot marked and the pin is there as well. It's like that. Fold it with the dot right at the fold. And I'm going to do it another way. Rather than clipping, I'm just going to mark it. That's the size of the seam allowance. Place the bunny front pieces right sides together and pin along the center front seam only. If you're not sure which one's the center front, you can see right where the nose is marked, that is the center front. So this whole seam right here. When you're sewing the seam, I want you to take notice of the neck here. This little point right here, right where I have this red pin, that is the point of the neck right under the chin. And this is what is going to define the head. So you want to make sure that you stop, put your needle down right at, you're going to have about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you'll put your needle down and pivot right there at that spot when you're sewing the seam. So we're going to turn the wheel, put the needle down, lift the presser foot, and turn the fabric so that you have a defined head. When you're done sewing the front seam, you're going to clip the seam allowance right where you pivoted. We're just cutting the fabric towards that point. And what this does, it allows the fabric to go smooth once it's turned right side out, so that you don't have a bunch right here at the neck. There's your bunny's face. You're so cute. Now we're going to do the same thing with the two back pieces, right sides together. The only difference is that we're going to leave an opening in the back, in the straight section of the back, about 3 or 4 inches long. Okay, so next we're going to attach the ears. So we have the front and we have the back. The back is the one with the hole. So there's the front. That's going to be the face. And you should have marked where the ears are going to go. I see one mark, but I don't see my second. Okay, there's 2 marks for me. Okay, you're going to grab your 2 ears, and they should go like this, so that you've got a right and a left ear, like this. And so then we're going to take the right ear and put it on the right side with the right sides together, like this. I have 2 marks. My ear's a little bit wider than the 2 marks, but I'm just going to center it over that. And I'm going to make sure that the edge of the ear is all lined up with the edge of the fabric. It's very thick and kind of tricky to pin it. So now we have the front bunny, and we're going to put front and back right sides together. And now we're going to match up the center bottom seams like this. The darts pretty much match up too, but don't worry too much about them if they're a little bit off. We want to match up the ends at the bottom of the feet. And you're not going to be sewing across the feet, because we're going to, after we sew the leg seam, then we're going to add the little bottom of the paw part. So there's going to be 2 full seams here. You're going to do one across the bottom legs, and then you're going to do one the front of the legs all the way around the arm, around the head, and around the other side, all the way to here. So we're going to do tons of pins here. Take your time. And the ear is going to be tucked between the layers. We're going to make sure that you don't stitch any other part of the ear except for right here. So our seam allowance is still 1/2 inch, and you might find it helpful to draw a line to help you out with that. Remember, not sewing one of it. And you can flatten the seams out to the side of the darts. Now we're going to clip the corners and the curves. So the part that's going to matter the most is anywhere you have an inside corner like this, you need to clip the excess seam allowance in here so that it can open up like that. Otherwise you'll have a lot of bunching on the inside and it makes a huge difference. So you want to clip up to, but you don't want to cut your stitching. Just pretty close to it. Attach the feet. Now we're going to attach the feet, and I'm just going to show you kind of how that's going to go. So this oval is going to be attached to here. What I want to do is start by marking the center top and bottom of each foot. I'll fold it in half like this, and you can mark it by just cutting a tiny little cut. That way you can see center top and bottom. And the other thing we're going to do is clip into the seam allowance the bottom of the foot. Now you're going to do quite a few little snips, but not very big, about 1/4 inch. It has to be for sure less than 1/2 inch. Otherwise it will be within the seam allowance and it's not going to work. You'll have a hole. I'm just going to trim the seam allowance down here a little bit. And the foot is going to fit like this with that mark. So that's the seam. It's going to go with the other point that I clipped, like this. And if you kind of put the foot down on the table, then you can see how the opening of the leg, because you clipped it, see how it just kind of goes around that corner? I'm going to add a few more clips like this, and you're just going to be sewing all in here. And you're going to sew all the way around. Place the sole of the foot down on your sewing machine so that you can see the leg part while you're sewing. Before we turn it, I'm going to just check and see if I clipped all the corners. I'm not going to trim my seam allowance down just because of this fabric. I don't want it to fray. And I don't want it to come apart there. So I just want to, I'm going to leave my seam allowance as big. But if you have minky fabric, then yeah, you could go ahead and trim the seam allowance down. Especially it'll help in the curves a little bit. If you find that your seam, that once you turn it right side out, if it looks kind of bumpy on the seam, trimming some of the seam allowance down will help. Another thing you can do is do little pie shapes out of the outside corners. And that allows the seam allowance to have somewhere to go on the inside. Okay, I'm ready to turn. Ah, you're adorable. Very floppy and very, very cute. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, so now it's time to stuff Bunny. So what I'm going to be using is a little bit of Poly Pellets stuffing beads. I'm just going to put a scoop in the bottom of the feet and the end of the hands. I'm also going to be using the leftover bits of little pieces from the shawl that I used to make the bunny. Because I might as well just use them up, right? And they're nice and soft and squishy, so I think it's going to be good. And then I'm going to put a little bit of polyfill as well, which is like that. So we're going to start with the feet and the arms and try to get those stuffed really well, and then move into the head and then the body, and then we'll sew it up. We'll do 2 scoops. That's 1/4 cup. And then I'm going to just put 1 scoop in each hand. Okay, so it's a good idea. Hello, David, you've come to help. As soon as you put your scoop of stuffing beads, if you're using those, immediately put a little piece of stuffing to hold it down so they don't come out. They're messy. It's best to use small pieces if you're going to be using scraps of fabric, lightweight and small pieces. Now we're going to use the ladder stitch to sew up the hole at the back. I have a piece of strong craft thread. It's quite thick. If you don't have something that's thick like this, you can just use regular sewing thread, and just be sure to double it. When I'm using this, I'm just going to go single. And I have a piece that's like about 20 inches long. I have a needle, and I have a needle threader from Creaky Press, and I really, really love it, and it's so pretty, and I'm going to use it. I just need to tie a knot on one of the threads because I'm just doing a single. So I'm going to be working from right to left, and I'll be talking about this half as the top and this half as the bottom. And I'm going to insert my needle inside a little ways back. I'm using a dark color thread so that it shows up better, but usually I would be using a thread that matched my fabric. So I just got it in there. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little stitch so I can get close to the opening. Okay, so now I'm on the top, and I'm going to take my next stitch on the bottom, and it's going to start directly down from where the thread came out on the top. And I want to go along like this. I'm doing a stitch in a straight line along the opening. And now I'm on here, and I'm going to go straight up and take a stitch along the top, starting directly above where that one came out. And now I'm going directly below. And I'm going to show you what happens when it's time to pull it. All the threads go inside and they become invisible. And I'm just going to keep on going that way until it's done. I'm at the end. So now I'm going to tie a knot. So I'm going to go back down in and I'm going to come out along the seam somewhere up there where I can get a knot and get it to anchor in, I think. I'm going to loop a few times in and out here. I'm going to do a really small stitch here and then stick my needle through 2 times and then pull it tight. And then I'm going to slide the needle back in to hide it and give it a good little tug. Can't see it. Sometimes I'll do that 2 times. If I really want to secure it, I'll go again. Tiny stitch through a couple of times. Pull it tight and disappear. And that's with a dark thread, and you can see it's pretty invisible. Okay, so now we're going to sew on the eyes, and if you want to, you could use the pattern to mark the spot where the eyes should go, but I don't usually find that that's necessary. I'll just play around with different spots. I'll use pins and just see what I think of that placement. And you'll notice that as you move the eyes around, it creates different expressions. And so it really, you get to add a lot of character by moving your eyes around and trying out different things. So that's what I do. I have a doll needle. Basically, a doll needle is just a really long needle. This head isn't even that big, and I could probably do it with a smaller one as well. But I'm gonna use this. I'm using craft thread again. So I'm gonna start right here where I put the pin. There. Now I can take the pins away. So I've got the knot. I've got it coming out through the button. I'm going to go back in. And this time I'm going to loop through the other side of that thread. It will help hold it tight. So you can pull on the thread a little bit so that the eyes will go in. It gives the face a little more shape. And I'm just coming out right above the eye again. I'm going to go in one more time back through here and then knot again on this eye. Just go back and forth till you think it's strong enough. Make sure you go through the button the second time. Through the button. Back here. Okay, so now I just have a little bit of thread left. I'm going to tie a knot. I want to tie a knot right above the eye, so it'll be hidden by the eye. This needle is too long to tie with, so I'm just going to use a shorter one. Got it on. So I'm just going to loop one thread through a little chunk of the fabric. Pull it out. Now, see how it's coming out of a different place than the other one? So now when I tie these two threads together, like this, they're going to be holding on to a piece of the fabric and it will not be able to go through the fabric. So it will be a strong knot. Okay, so I'm going to do 1, 2, and another one. Deep. Hello. Welcome to the world. Now we're going to do satin stitch to embroider the nose. Got a long thread and I'm going to use all 6 strands for this. So now to hide the end, I'm just going to like weave it in and out a little bit. Oh, bunny. You are cute. Just a little tiny ribbon. Pink. Jaunty.